Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, whenever you're tuning in. I'm running a little bit of a one-man weave, if you will, this week. Talking a little off-season. The Commanders made a move, big move. A lot going on around the Super Bowl contender or the Super Bowl participants from this past year, and some other big moves in the off-season. So let's jump right into it. I'm going to talk about my beloved Commanders right out the gate. Trade for Laramie Tunsil, give up some draft capital. In my opinion, it's not a lot of draft capital that they gave up. And what they get in return in Laramie Tunsil is a guy that is one of the whatever number you want to put on it, right? Maybe 5, maybe 7. I don't know how deep you want to go when talking about Laramie Tunsil at the left tackle position. But the truth is, it's a needed upgrade. Offensive line was a bit of a concern for the Commanders last year. Jaden Daniels is their most prized asset right now. And while he avoided major injury last year, he did get nicked up in the game against the Panthers, took a shot to the ribs. Now, that's not on the offensive line. I think he was caught a little bit in between getting down and being able to outrun defenders, that sort of thing. So the hope is that pairing a better offensive line with a little bit more maturity and better decision-making on his part, we can continue to push off the stigma of the running quarterback. Lamar Jackson has avoided it for a long time. And I think Jaden did a much better job as the season went on, protecting himself and not taking big hits, and really making better decisions as the season went in terms of when to, go for that extra yard, the first down, and when not to. But the Laramie Tunsil piece, to me, it's a guy who's 30-ish, right? And he's been regarded as one of the better tackles in football. He's been traded already to the Texans, and then the Texans were willing to move on after a bad year last year with their offensive line. Dad, appreciate you joining. And with the Texans, it was a little bit of a conundrum, but I think they're trying to figure out exactly where their cap situation is as CJ Stroud is a year closer to getting paid. They had some different guys. Will Anderson's going to have to get paid, and we see what the money is. We're going to talk about Myles Garrett here in a minute, but we see what the money is for edge rusher, and Will Anderson is certainly a good edge rusher on that team. They've got a lot of defensive pieces. That secondary is full of pretty good players as well. It's going to be really tight for them in terms of navigating the cap coming up, and I think that was a little bit of what led them to move on from Tunsil. On top of, drafting pretty well and hoping they can find some interchangeable parts on the offensive line to replace him. But from Washington's perspective, I've been using this word. I've migrated over to Blue Sky to try out a little different social media platform, and I've been talking a bit about that. So if you have an opportunity, check us out on Blue Sky. But it really is one word for this offseason that I'll use to describe Washington's offseason. It's deliberate. They're very deliberate with what they wanted to do. Re-sign their own in terms of the pieces they see as pieces of the future, pieces of now. We just saw they re-sign Noah Igbenogany. They've also brought in some pieces, depth pieces, a kind of do-it-all edge-ish from the Bears. Some depth on the D-line, especially in the middle of the D-line with the loss of Jonathan Allen. I expect Johnny Newton to play a much bigger role next year, keeping Tress Way, who I think is one of the handful best punters in the league. Now, hopefully we don't have to use him very much. As we saw last year, Washington had set a couple of records when it comes to not punting in games. A lot of that comes down to being confident and going for it on fourth down as well. But when Tress Way is in the game, he can be a bit of a weapon when it comes to pinning the ball inside the 10, inside the 5. And then he can throw it on a fake punt. We saw it against the Eagles. Now, ultimately, we lost that game. But keeping your own has been a big theme for Washington, and being very, very deliberate with trades and signs. I talked about the Deebo Samuel trade a couple weeks ago on the show. I love what they're doing. Right now, you've got a window. Everybody knows, right? It's no secret that the most valuable asset maybe in all of sports is a rookie quarterback contract with a rookie quarterback that can play. All right. We saw the Seahawks with Russell Wilson. They were confident in him. They built around him. They had an incredible historic defense, great run game, very good offensive line, and they won a Super Bowl out of it and nearly won 2, right? With maybe better decision-making at the goal line. They could be 2-time Super Bowl champions with Russell Wilson at the helm. So that rookie quarterback contract is incredibly valuable. And we see Washington right now saying, all right, we see our windows open. We got to the NFC Championship game in a year when we weren't expected to win maybe 5, 6, 7 games. And it was going to be really kind of the pivot year, right, in the rebuild. Got your rookie quarterback. Now let's figure out where we go from here. They get to the NFC Championship game, and now they want to seize the opportunity. And I love it. I love how deliberate they're being. I love how direct. They have a plan. And I know a lot of Washington fans out there can sympathize with me. It's been a long time since we've been able to say that about a front office, that they have a plan. It seems cohesive, and they're very deliberate about the offseason. Now, I want to shift gears to another NFC East team in Philly. Is losing a lot of contributors to that Super Bowl team last year. Now they've kept a lot of their major pieces, right? I don't know that they're going to miss a ton of kind of the guys that they've lost, but those guys are contributing pieces. Sweat and some of the other folks that they've lost in the defensive rotation, and they are getting a little longer in the tooth on the offensive side of the ball. But as all Philly fans will tell you, like, in Howie they trust, right? And they have. I want to say they have like 23, I think it is, picks over the next 2 years, and they have 11 of those are in like the top 4 rounds. So they've got a lot of draft capital to work with. Now, if you're going to make that decision, they've got to continue to hit on draft picks, right? And Eagles fans will quickly point out, and they're correct, that Howie's done a very good job in the draft. Now, that is a strategy. And if you are successful at that strategy, you can do a lot of the things they've been able to do in terms of being aggressive. The A.J. Brown move was aggressive. Paying Devontae Smith early was aggressive. Paying Jalen Hurts when there's been a lot of questions about whether or not he can be a guy that can win you the big game. Well, they were right. They went and won a Super Bowl. Locking up the defense and drafting incredibly well on the defensive side of the ball with what Quinn Mitchell and Cooper DeJean were able to do as rookies last year. It's just honestly like they've done a great job, and they're going to lean on continuing to do that with their approach to this offseason, because the folks that they've lost in free agency, they've resulted in some compensatory picks that you look at, and Philly's going to say, well, we've got some draft capital to work with. So I don't know that I expect a precipitous fall off from Philly based on the loss of these contributors. I think what Philly might run into is that maybe some of the rest of the NFC is getting better, and we're going to talk about another team in the NFC here in a minute that seemingly went out and got better. Washington, as I mentioned, the trades that they're making, you feel like those are things that are going to contribute. And yeah, I agree, Dad. I assume you're talking about Washington being in Super Bowl position. That's what they're trying to capitalize on, and they're trying to get to where Philly was last year. And you look at Green Bay maturing another year. Is Jordan Love going to get to where he's a little more consistent? We've seen a lot of up and a lot of down from him. Are the Vikings going to be as good as they were last year? Are the Lions going to be as good as they were last year? The Lions have been a little bit active in free agency, made a couple of good moves that I think are pretty solid. I wish Mode was here to talk about them tonight. But it's going to be a competitive NFC, and I just don't know, right, if you can just rely on sustaining. So Philly's going to have to hit in the draft, and they're going to have to get some contributors right away. On the other side of that Super Bowl, the Chiefs have kind of remained status quo in a lot of ways. I think they're preparing for the fact that they've got some young guys that are going to come due for money. I think they're also in a spot where, Mahomes signed a fairly team-friendly deal, but there were a couple of years in there that, as things kind of compile, as you restructure, it's a lot of kind of kicking the can down the road that these teams do with these quarterback contracts. Because they're so big, it's the easiest way to make room by restructuring. But the Chiefs losing a couple of offensive linemen, and we're going to talk about one of those offensive linemen that got traded in a moment here. But I said it after the Super Bowl, and I think I'm going to double down on it tonight. And I'm going to say, like, we might have seen Patrick Mahomes play in his last Super Bowl. And I don't say that lightly, because you have to respect the greatness. They have won 3 out of 4, gone to like 9 out of 10. No, it's just like 4 out of 5. And he's gone to 6 or 5, something like that. 5, yeah. But the big thing really is that, I just don't. I look at it and I say they've missed in a lot of ways in the draft the last few years, and the things that sustained them in certain positions, in certain scenarios and games, I think is starting to go away. That reliance on Travis Kelce. We're going to see Rashee Rice serve some sort of suspension this year. He's coming off a major injury as well. So you're looking at like potentially a guy that's missed a season and a half or something along those lines. Is he going to be the same? Modern medicine, sure. We see guys come back from that sort of injury all the time, but there's always that question, right? Is he going to be the same guy? Xavier Worthy is a bit of a gadget guy. I don't know if he's going to ever evolve into a guy that you can just line up and say, go win me a first down on a route or something along those lines. Very fast guy. You get him the ball when he's moving full speed. We've seen it several times where he can make plays, but that offensive line didn't get better in free agency. I don't know how much better it's going to get in the draft. And I was really surprised to see that, especially like Joe Thuney, like maybe their best offensive lineman last year. He was willing to move in the playoffs because they were injured on the front. I just don't know with the Chiefs, like where are they going? Where are they going, and how's the reload going to work? They're going to have to nail the draft. It really is that they're going to have to nail the draft. And they've had some good drafts, and they've had some not so great selections, but also some not so great free agent moves. The DeAndre Hopkins move last year, everybody lauded it, thinking, DeAndre's going to go there and be great. He wasn't really. Hollywood Brown, same thing. I know he missed most of the season with the clavicle injury, but it's just one of those things that, you can't just expect to reload. And I think the Chiefs are running into an AFC that's catching up. I think they're running into an AFC that's been built to beat this version of the Chiefs. And we'll see whether there's an evolution or if there's some sort of, tear it down and rebuild it stronger, something along those lines, and whether Mahomes can be the guy that's going to bridge between those. Or, I'm not really certain what the future holds for the Chiefs, but I, as an onlooker, I'm going to stand on the fact that I just the light at the end of the tunnel just seems to be everybody's like, Mahomes he's the guy. He's going to figure out he's going to do it. They won in spite of him the last couple of seasons in a lot of ways. Of course, he's always that guy in crunch time that's going to be able to get something done, but you can't live that dangerously and continue to be as successful as they've been. Eventually that bill comes due. And I just think that's what we're seeing right now with what Philly was able to do to them up front. Every AFC team is going to try like hell to replicate that. And yeah, I agree. Bit of a question mark there going forward. Speaking of trading offensive linemen, the Bears went out and got a bunch. We saw them make a lot of moves in the offseason last year. Didn't necessarily work out. They bring in Ben Johnson, and they're trying to replicate what Ben Johnson was able to be a part of up in Detroit and help build. Get strong up front, give Caleb a lot of protection, and figure out the rest, right? Put some weapons around him. They've already got a pretty good defense. It's not going to be as good in a lot of ways, but of course, whatever they reload with in the draft, we'll see. But I just don't know, right? When you go out and you have this approach of like assembling the super team is what I thought they were saying last year they were trying to assemble, right? It felt like the Philadelphia Eagles approach of let's go get Keenan Allen and let's draft another wide receiver. And we brought in Caleb Williams and didn't really address the offensive line last year. Well, now this year they kind of reversed course and Keenan Allen is onward and upward, and they're trying to address the offensive line. Rome Odunze was good, not great last year as a rookie. I think he'll take a step. DJ Moore was good, not great as a number one wide receiver last year. If Caleb plays better, I expect those two to play better because I think they're very reliable receivers. I like them. I liked Rome Odunze coming out of college, but it was an underwhelming rookie campaign for those two. And Caleb Williams kind of sneakily had a very good statistical rookie season. But I'll tell you what, the eyeball test was not good. For those that may have watched, or those of you that didn't watch a Bears game, I'll enlighten you a little bit what I mean by the eyeball test. Caleb Williams, statistically, he was accountable for something like 40% of the sacks he took last year, which was, I believe, either the highest or second highest in the league, holding the ball a long time. There was a lot of the knock on him in college, if there was truly a knock, was that he liked to play hero ball. And we saw a lot of that with Chicago. And when you're a guy that's as just unbelievably physically gifted as a Caleb Williams is, you get away with that stuff in high school. You get away with that stuff in college. And he got away with it a lot at USC. But I think we saw him get beat down a little bit last year with USC, or 2 years ago with USC, his last year at USC, when the defense wasn't very good. The playmakers around him weren't very good. They weren't winning. And he was kind of down and out in a lot of those games, like almost like he was like, all right, I'm ready to go to the NFL, and I'm just ready to be over this, whatever this was at USC in his final year there in Southern California. So I think we saw a lot of that last year when he was a rookie as well. They'd get down in games, or he'd get beat up in games, and his body language is just really, really bad. I'm going to go to the Hail Mary game. He was really kind of in the doldrums almost the entire game. And then Washington kind of lets it get away, and they go and they score a touchdown after that fumble at the goal line. And he had been really kind of mopey and not great body language. They score the touchdown. He's all, happy go lucky. And then the Hail Mary happens, and it's almost like he just like checks out. He's dejected, like, God, here we go again, that sort of thing. Now, I get it. A shocking loss is a shocking loss. But you want your leaders on your team, you want your quarterback especially, to be able to weather some of that and be kind of the calming influence within a locker room. So I think we're gonna look this year at what kind of maturity we're gonna see from Caleb Williams. But we're also going to see whether or not Ben Johnson can do for Caleb some of the things he did for Jared Goff. Are they going to be able to run play action more? Because the Bears really didn't threaten you last year with play action. The offensive line was so bad, you didn't really have to worry about the run game. You could get after the quarterback even in play action. And then you get Caleb Williams dancing around and trying to make plays and getting outside the pocket. And that's where you can kind of you were able to get to him last year. And he didn't make a ton of like interception mistakes because he didn't turn the ball over too much, right? As a rookie, especially. But it was the missed throws. It was the overthrows, the underthrows, the dirt balls, the air mails, those sorts of things. He missed a lot of open receivers when he's outside of the pocket trying to make things happen. Those are the things you want to see him clean up. Those are the things you want to see Ben Johnson get him on schedule, get him in rhythm. Run the ball well, but also just get Caleb comfortable in a 5-step drop, a 7-step drop. Boom, boom, boom. First, second, third read, ball's out, right? Something quick. You hit the top of your drop and you're ready to go. Because that didn't seem like it was really in the cards at all last year, with the exception of like 3/4 of a football game right after the first coach change on the offensive side of the ball. They did have a little bit of like a run there, and then the wheels just seemed to fall off again. And I think it was a team that was just very defeated. So that's what I'm looking for. If Ben Johnson is the truth, as he's been praised for the last couple of off seasons with teams fawning over him and trying to bring him in as their head coach, if that's his calling card, then this is the perfect situation for Caleb Williams to turn it around, and that's what I'll be looking for, right? Are we going to see that growth? Are we going to see him get comfortable? Are we going to see him be on schedule? Are we going to see him run an offense that stays within rhythm, stays ahead of the chains, those sorts of things? Don't take a lot of sacks. Don't hold the ball. Bail your offensive line out. Even with the improvements that you make on an offensive line, you can't just block forever, right? So let's hit the top of our drop, make our reads, get the ball out. And I think Bears fans will be singing a little different tune if they can get that offense humming the way that everybody expects a Ben Johnson to be able to do. I want to switch conferences here, and I'm going to talk a little bit about a team that's kind of near and dear to my heart, but I know it's near and dear to my dad's heart. He's in the chat here. The Bills make some room. Josh Allen restructures his contract this offseason. I think they could still be in play for big names in the secondary. So Asante Samuel is still on the market. Now, I know metrically speaking, he wasn't playing very well last year. He was a bit nicked up, but I think he's a guy that fits Sean McDermott's defensive approach. He's a guy that plays much better with his eyes in the backfield. He's a guy that plays much better in kind of ball hawking style of defensive back play. And that's what Sean McDermott does. That's what he did with Josh Norman in Carolina. That's what he's done with some folks in Buffalo. Trey White, before his injuries really sapped him, he was a great player in that kind of system. So I think a guy like Asante Samuel could be great in Buffalo's scheme. I'm curious why he remains unsigned. I wonder if he's trying to drive a price that we would expect for guys like Patrick Surtain, who's going to reset the market at the cornerback position, a Sauce Gardner, some of those guys that you look at and you say, those are guys you can put on an island. And yeah, yeah, for those that are new, the beard's gone. And we got a little more clean cut look. I'm sure my mom appreciates that, as she says. But I'm looking at Buffalo and I'm saying, like, this Asante Samuel thing, I think it seems to make some sense. They lost Rasul Douglas. He's a bit long in the tooth. Asante Samuel's still a young guy. I believe turns 26 this year, or he is 26 and turns 27, but still young. And he's a guy that I think can make a lot of plays in a Sean McDermott defense. So I think that's what we're looking at with the Bills in terms of what they're going to do with some of their leftover money after the Josh Allen restructure, because they've made a couple of moves. I know some Buffalo Bills fans that weren't super excited about the Josh Palmer move, but I think he's a guy that can make some plays in this offense. I think Josh Allen is a rising tide. So I don't think you have to put a bunch of superstar playmakers on the offensive side of the ball with him for them to be great on offense. I just think that there's a handful of guys in the league that we call them the elite class of quarterback, and those are the guys that can make plays no matter who's around them. And Josh Allen is in that category, if you ask me. I'm going to shift gears to some money here. So couple of Brinks trucks got emptied out over the last 10 days or so. Myles Garrett comes out and tells the Browns he wants a trade. Now, my eyes light up because actually, I'm going to go back to Buffalo real quick. My dad's got a question about the Bills. Speaking of edge rushers, I don't think his career is over. I think I'm going to make a prediction here. One, they were able to cut bait and save a bunch of money against the cap with him. I think Von Miller is going to go to the ranch. He's going to hang out till November, maybe late October, and then he's going to move back up to Western New York, and he's going to play late November. He's going to play December. He's going to be healthy in January, and he's going to be a guy they're going to bring in for a playoff run. That's my prediction for Von Miller. I think he can be productive in that role. I think the money was just way too much for them to keep him around this offseason. But back to Myles Garrett. So he comes out and he says, I want to trade. I want to go to a contender. I want you to move me somewhere where I'm going to be able to win. My eyes lit up immediately because we need an edge rusher. We need one in Washington. And a guy like Myles Garrett can be a difference maker. We've got draft capital. We can give up some draft capital because, as I said, once you've figured out your quarterback, which we did this past season, once you've figured that out, the sky's the limit, and you try to build around that quarterback as much as possible. And a guy like Myles Garrett, I think, makes enough of a difference that even if it was a couple of ones and maybe even a player or something along those lines, I think you go get him. But we find out the Browns stood their ground. They said they weren't going to trade him, and I didn't believe it. I don't think a lot of people believed it. But in the end, he gets $40 million a year, the highest paid non-quarterback in the league. And fuck winning. Am I right? Like, who cares about winning when you can swim in money like Scrooge McDuck, essentially. So Myles Garrett gets a big old bag. And before we get to our next big payday that we're going to talk about with the backing up of a Brinks truck, we're going to get to the most important part of the episode. Raul and I, co-founders of Backyard Sports, and we served together in the Navy. As veterans, a veteran-owned podcast, we like to dedicate every episode to a fallen service member in our Folds of Honor sponsored segment called Salute to Service. Tonight's episode goes out to Sergeant First Class Dustin Ard. He died August 29, 2019, serving during Operation Freedom Sentinel. Sergeant First Class Ard was 31 at the time of his passing, hailing from Hyde Park, Utah. Died from wounds sustained during combat operations in Zabul Province, Afghanistan. He was assigned to 2nd Battalion, 1st Special Forces Group Airborne at Joint Base Lewis McChord in Washington. Sergeant First Class Dustin Ard, we have the watch. All right. So the uncomfortable transition from that to let's talk another Brinks truck that got backed up, or I guess two, right? For the Cincinnati Bengals. They've basically said, we're all in. Usually when we talk about a big three, we're talking about basketball. But in this case, we're talking about the Cincinnati Bengals. They have gone all in with Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, and Jamar Chase. They're probably going to trade Trey Hendrickson before the season starts. They haven't found a suitor yet. But Joe Burrow has stood on the fact that he would take a pay cut even if it meant keeping Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. And that was always something I said, like, when we get to the point we have another quarterback that's willing to do stuff like that, we might see another run like Tom Brady had. Not just the restructure, but he literally said he would take a pay cut. Didn't have to. They get the deal done. Jamar Chase is the highest paid wide receiver. T. Higgins gets, I think they both got like $250 million combined. It was an absurd number. Right now, Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins will account for approximately 45% of the Cincinnati Bengals cap. And that's a huge, huge number for one side of the ball to have a big three on one side. Usually we'll see that number spread out amongst like a quarterback, a wide receiver, an edge rusher, and maybe a corner, right? Or a left tackle, right? Or something along those lines. You'll see it spread out among a few positions, but it's never really, we haven't really seen in this era, right, of these big paydays where it's a quarterback and two wide receivers that are just eating up an unbelievable amount of money. You look at what the Cowboys have with Dak and CD. They're not even eating up that big a number combined. It's close, but not that big. And you know how the Cowboys fared when they kind of screwed themselves and let the market reset. Now they've got to pay Micah Parsons probably more than what Myles Garrett got. But the Bengals, they're all in. They're going to try to outscore everybody. They kept Joe Burrow happy, which I support 100% that they should have been trying to keep Joe Burrow happy. I just question who's going to play defense for the Cincinnati Bengals. Because if they trade away Trey Hendrickson, who was the leading sack getter, he's been the leading sack getter over the last couple of years combined. He's been unbelievable. He's been much better against the run as well, which was always his knock early in his career. But yeah, the defense was real bad. Jamar Chase wins the Triple Crown and you don't make the playoffs. Joe Burrow led the league in passing yards and touchdowns, I believe. And maybe he was close in completion percentage. But they were unbelievable on offense and couldn't play defense. And it doesn't seem like it's going to get any better this year. They move off of Lou Anarumo, who I think is a very good defensive coordinator, who's a highly respected defensive coordinator in the NFL, who had done a bang-up job for them for several years. You look back at what they were able to do against the Chiefs, just confounding Patrick Mahomes in crunch time often. In their battles, they got to a Super Bowl with Lou Anarumo. But yeah, I wonder who's going to play defense for them now. They're going to have to draft very well on that side of the ball. And they're really going to have to lean heavily on Joey B, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins really to kind of carry them to the promised land. I will say this. They've got a couple of young guys on the offensive side that can complement what they do. Chase Brown, who got injured late last year but shouldn't miss any time. And they were a big hit on him after they let Joe Mixon go. There were a lot of people that were confused why he was not extended there in Cincy, but Chase Brown did a very good job this year. It's going to be the defensive side of the ball that these young guys are going to have to step up, and they're going to have to draft well, and they're going to have to draft some starters that are going to play right away, because that's a unit that's pretty devoid of talent with all of the money they've invested in the offensive side of the ball. On to brighter news. There are a lot of talking heads out there that are saying the Rams are going to be the best team in the NFC. I mentioned when I was talking about the Commanders and the Eagles that the NFC has gotten better in a lot of ways. There's some teams that have gone out and improved in the NFC. The Rams are definitely one of them. And pairing Devontae with Puka Nacua and the whole jersey change thing, that was an interesting thing. Puka's going to go back to his college jersey number 12. And then moving off of Cooper Kupp, who goes and gets a good amount of money in division. But, I think there's a bit of an upgrade with Devontae. I think he still has some juice left in the tank. I don't know. if you're better than a guy who I think Cooper Kupp, I think was washed. I think Cooper Kupp is done. I think Devontae is on the back nine, if not the last few holes of his career. I think it's a little bit of an upgrade. There's a lot of talking heads out there saying that Devontae and Puka Nacua are now the best wide receiver duo in football. I don't think that's true. I think there's still a couple out there that I would take. I think Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, I think, are a better duo. I would say that A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith are probably a better duo. I don't think that Devontae Smith is that big of an upgrade on what they had with Cooper Kupp. I think the biggest thing they get with him is another red zone weapon and a guy who moves the chains very well. Big-bodied guy, great route runner, very good discipline on the sideline, very good foot control, body control. And we've seen what Puka's been able to do with the volume that he gets. Matthew Stafford likes to sling it. Rams are going to sling it. I think the one thing that makes the Rams arguably maybe the best team in the NFC is, one, they were a play away from beating the Eagles last year, who went on to win the Super Bowl. But it's the fact that they have hit home run after home run after home run on the defensive side of the ball, especially when you look at the defensive line in the last two drafts. They probably had the two best rookie defensive players in football each of the last 2 years on their defensive line. And I know there's plenty of argument to be made about some of the other defensive rookies as well. But, man, the home runs that Les Snead and company hit on the defensive side of the ball in the trenches, huge, especially losing Aaron Donald to retirement. They had to rebuild that defensive line. They've done well at linebacker. They've got a pretty good secondary. It's not great. That's probably where they need to upgrade this year in the draft if they can. Excuse me. But you look at great defense, young team, young core, and they've got a leader in Matthew Stafford that, old Graybeard is gonna lead that offense out there. I like the Devontae pickup for them. I don't think it's a home run in terms of an upgrade like a lot of folks on some of the programs out there. But I think it's a good move for them. Now, does it make them the best team in the NFC? Probably not. I still look at Philly and I say, man, that defensive front is menacing still. Jordan Davis and Jalen. Now his name, I'm losing his name off the top of my head, but they're still great in the middle up front. Still going to be good on the edges. They're losing Brandon Graham, who's a big mentor, but I think they'll be fine replacing him. I just look at Philly and I say, like, if they continue to draft well, Jalen Carter, by the way, his name just came to me. If they continue to draft well, though, they've got a great core. And I still look at Philly. They're the defending Super Bowl champs. To be the man, you got to beat the man. So Philly's probably still at the top. I think the Rams are right there, though, next echelon, right? You're looking at who's the next team. I'll throw probably 3, maybe 4 teams in the mix. I would say it's Detroit. I would say it's the Rams. And I probably would say Washington should have a claim to being in that group of, like, is this the team that's going to take the next step? Lurking, you've got the Packers. You've got the Vikings. What's J.J. McCarthy going to be? Is he going to play this year? Are they going to go get Aaron Rodgers? That sort of thing. Are the Niners going to be able to retool? Probably not with the way they got torn apart. But did the Bears make the right moves? There's some teams in the NFC that I think are going to be able to compete in that next kind of step, that next category of teams. And I'm sure I missed some that somebody's going to yell at me maybe in the chat about. But I still think it's the Eagles, and then everybody else is playing catch up because obviously when you're the defending Super Bowl champs, can't knock you off the pedestal until we beat you. So that covers all of the topics we were trying to cover tonight. I appreciate the activity in the chat. Appreciate the viewers. We got some decent numbers tonight. Hopefully everybody checks out the show after it hits processing and gets posted as a recording. But for Raul and Andy, who couldn't be here tonight, and for everybody else at Backyard Sports, this has been Backyard Blitz, brought to you by Backyard Sports. We are out.